Hello, and welcome back to episode 8 of the Career Advice You Never Had podcast, where I provide you the career advice, education, and support you missed out on in your career journey. I'm your host, Angela, and today we'll be exploring Career Doodles with Naish. You may be wondering, what is a career doodle? Stick around to find out more as Naish shares his career story and what brought this concept to life. I'd love for you to notice the resonance of his journey and lean into what feels familiar, what may inspire action and helps you to understand your current situation from a different perspective. I really appreciate you listening today, and I love hearing your stories and takeaways, so keep them coming. Let's get into it. Hello, Naish, and welcome to the Career Advice You Never Had podcast. I'm really excited to have you on here to talk more about the career advice that maybe you never had and careers, and also a book that you've released that we'll get into in a little bit. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much, Angela, for the opportunity. I'm really looking forward to have a chat on a Friday afternoon. I think this is probably the good time to have a chat because it's more reflective and more relaxed in nature.
Definitely. And we're coming to the end of the National Careers Week, which when I release this podcast, it's going to be a few weeks past that. And we're just chatting about what we've done. It's a good way to recognize the industry and what is happening in that, and also get filled up on careers and remind us why we do the job that we do. And if we begin with the career advice that you never had, tell us a little bit about this topic for you, what it means and what it brings up along your journey.
Sure. So to give you a background, so I come from India, where career advice when I was growing up in 90s was not particularly a field or an expert that you would go to. Most of the career advice came from our teachers, to our parents, to somebody elder in our family, somebody who's probably had more societal status and more wealthier or had a lot of connections. And so that's where the career advice really came from. For me, career advice was very simple. I had two choices. One, either I could be an engineer or I could be a doctor. And I did not score as much, as, my dad expected, or that would get me into medicine degree. So the only choice that I was left with was engineering. And that's where I really went into, studied 4 years of mechanical engineering. Once I finished my engineering and I started my first job as a manufacturing engineer, that's where I kind of started to understand, oh God, am I going to be doing this forever? And I did not really like the answer that I got, that I don't want to work with machines, or I don't even understand the whole concept of, manufacturing. And this wasn't something that I anticipated. So I think from that day onwards, I moved out of the core manufacturing and worked in still engineering, but different context. That was the advice that I never had, was that what should I have done instead of engineering? What kind of careers or what kind of studies I should have done that would probably give me a bit more satisfaction or played on my strengths. That's the advice that I never got.
It is interesting when we look back to those moments where we would have made that decision either in high school or when we are studying. And it reminds me that we do have a big influence on the people that we live with and the people that we've grown up with, and what was usual in our society, what's well respected, as sometimes that guidance. And I'm not sure, you mentioned you grew up in India. Was there any sit down and chat about subjects or anything?
It was very, very black and white. I remember that when you come to grade 10, that's where you can choose whether you want to go on the commerce pathway or you go on more of the science pathways. And I chose to go on science pathways, not the commerce pathways. And if you go on the science pathway, then you've got more pathways such as medicine or healthcare or engineering. These are the pathways that opens up for you. They're prerequisite subjects, as that happens in VC in Australia too, that you've got prerequisite subjects. And that was the only thing that I had, the science pathways, and that's what I chose. And I just went with it. I did not probably understood what's the difference between two pathways. It wasn't making growing up in 90s, the commerce pathways were not looked at favorably unless you've got some business background, unless your father or there's a family business that somebody runs. So that can lead you into that. But commerce pathways or arts was probably growing up was considered to be the least favored pathway. And it doesn't lead you anywhere. It's kind of, who are you going to become? Like artist, like there's not even clarity that where it leads you. Engineering, medicine, there's absolute clarity. That's what you're going to do. And stability, security was a big thing at that time. Things have changed, but at that time, that this guarantees you a job, or this guarantees you a career, sets you up for life. And those are the things that really played on my parents or even the larger societal influence that led me into that direction.
And it's interesting that you talk about that arts area. And I studied a Bachelor of Social Science. When I went through high school, very unsure about what I wanted to be when I grew up. I couldn't choose that one thing. I wanted to explore and see what else was out there. I hadn't tried anything apart from casual jobs. And I went into social science, not really knowing what that end path was, whereas the engineering and the sort of commerce ones, you know the job, what it's going to be when you finish. And I did have an interest in psychology, got into university and went, I'm actually not interested in this. I did one whole semester and then changed. Only with the guidance of myself. I remember talking to people, but I never knew where this degree could take me. And I remember pushing myself through. It got to one of the last semesters and I went, what do I actually do when I finish? Yeah. Because it is very open-ended, and I didn't know that you then had to possibly, there are pathways with the 3 or 4 year degree that you can then specialize and then you choose something to do in the next year. It wasn't until someone said, do you know that you can be a teacher with 1 more year of studies? I went, I can work with kids. I can do that. And that was the only thinking. Yeah. And when I look back now, to have that guidance at university level, where could this degree take me would have been so helpful, because it was so open-ended. And there's lots of art degrees and social science, and that sometimes when we finish and we get that piece of paper, it doesn't qualify us to move into a specific job. We may have to add on or be creative how we use our particular degree. And I know that you work in a university. Do you have people coming to you also asking, where could this take me, this particular university degree? Have you had conversations like that recently with people?
Yeah, I think it's a commonly asked questions around that I'm finishing my biomedicine degree, I'm finishing my mechanical engineering degree to an IT. I don't know where that leads me to. I think people will have a general idea where that leads them to. But I think the options are so many that people, I think, struggle to make sense of that option. As whether I have got the ability or the attributes to become more to work in research than to work in, let's say, operations. Or do I have the ability to work, or will I be more happy if I work in, selling an engineering equipment versus designing or working in quality assurance. So I think that's what, in my view, people struggle with, around making choices out of many things that they can do. And that itself could in one point of view, it's liberating because, hey, you can do multiple things, you can do many things. But it could also be quite overwhelming to decide on what will I do on January 1st, 2025 when I'm graduating, what kind of roles. So it's a commonly asked question, Angela, around not just uni students, but when I worked with a lot of skilled migrants when they arrive from overseas with lot of diverse experience, and say, I've worked in auditing, I've done bookkeeping, I've done financial control, I'm here, and I don't know, where do I go now from here? I can understand the career decision-making dilemma that an individual face around that. My view is that And as it happens, Angela, I think, we all talk about self-awareness, that it starts with understanding yourself and then starting to figure out which kind of roles is more suited to your own attributes. I like to think about when I did my design thinking studies, and I can cite an theory around, that design thinking principles. They ask us to create as many cells as possible and say, you can do auditing, or you can do bookkeeping, or you can do financial control, or you can do compliance, and you can do. So first and foremost is to invent as many cells as possible. And then checking out those cells, then undertaking interviews or doing some trials or researching to figure out whether that really aligns with who you are as an individual. And then you kind of arrive at a decision that this seems like to be the most viable, most workable, and most appropriate option out of all that I've identified. And then you go with that. Now, even then also, as we know, Angela, is that you still get 3 months later, you might find, what, I don't think so. This is not what I anticipated. I probably got a wrong impression about that one. But if you followed that pathway, if you followed that kind of approach before, you should consider doing the same exercise again, is to come up with as multiple cells and then trying to figure out which one is more suited or aligned to your skills, your strengths, your abilities, and your values. That's what I would suggest.
And I'm just even thinking back when you decided that the degree that you finished and that you then went into the industry wasn't right for you. And you said that you made that decision that this is not right. Back then, I'm not sure if you knew about design thinking, because we did the same course and that's where I learned about it as well. I wonder what kind of process you might have gone through back then without having the career advice, without having guidance by a career practitioner, that you knew that something wasn't right and you decided to not just push through and keep doing it and retire and possibly be really unhappy. What was it about that moment that you went, this is not right for me, I have to make a change or do something different?
Even in that one, what happened was I worked in a glass manufacturing unit for around 6 months, and one of my close friends, he started to work as a sales engineer with an engineering company, and he was about to leave that job. And he said, "Look, Naish, I'm leaving the job. Do you want this job? I can talk to the manager about you." And that was my escape from manufacturing to sales. I knew that I would be good in sales because I loved interacting with people. I was good at communicating with people. So I said, you know what? Yes, I'll give it a go. I did not know what sales even meant at that time. And I just resigned from here and started the job next week in my city. And since then, I just enjoyed that work. So it happened probably by just coincidence or taking chance that this is something that I might enjoy. I don't like this, but this is something that I might enjoy. And I just took a kind of a leap of faith in it. And then I ended up liking sales, marketing, business development. And then I continued worked in those kind of functions until I came here. Probably it was just happenstance. Someone was leaving. I jumped at it, took the leap of faith, and worked out. It worked out well for me.
Yes, and happenstance is a big thing. I'm going to unpack that in another episode, that sometimes those opportunities just arise that lead us somewhere that was never on the plan, and it's brought you to a step closer to where you are today, which I'm wondering, how did you get into career development from sales, marketing, engineering background, coming to Australia? At what point did career development, where does that fit in?
So I'll probably share a little sad story with you, because that's the context for this one. So when I came here in 2007, in the same year, I fell into a resume writing business opportunity. And being a new arrival, I did not know a lot about things, but I wanted to kind of settle myself in Australia quickly. I wanted to get things done quickly. So I jumped at it, not knowing what's involved. Or probably within 3-4 months of taking that business opportunity, I found out that it was a scam. When I signed up a legal contract, so that meant that I had to pay this guy off. That legal battle carried on for some time, and I just ran out of money. I just could not afford. And I made a dug a big black hole in our finances in a very early stage. And I had to ask my dad to, bail me out because I just did not have money. So that's the sad part of that. Eventually I paid off. That's all done. But then I thought that that's a really good work. I really enjoyed resume to working with people. I really liked it. So then I thought when I lost my job, second job in February of 2009, I thought maybe I can now pivot more and make career counseling as my career. So I ended up applying for jobs with Job Services Australia, Central Employment Agencies. And that they gave me the first chance. This was a Groundhog Day, working with people with really complex barriers. And I really enjoyed 3 years I spent with most disadvantaged communities. And I really enjoyed, my work. I learned immensely in that work. So that's what kind of fueled my thing, is that now I accidentally fell into that business opportunity, did not work out for me, but I carried on my work from there. And then I just kept on working in different employment contexts, universities, occupational rehab, a lot of other ones. And then in COVID times, I did my grad cert in career education because I felt that was a bucket list and that was becoming quite important to have the qualification in order to work in certain sectors. So that's what I ended up doing. 2009, I changed my career. So it's 2014, so coming to 15 years now.
This particular career, when you were deciding on which pathway to take, was that even a consideration when you were back in year 10 or grade 10 career advising?
No, I always tell that even when I changed my career, my mom, dad, or my wife, my father and mother-in-law, they could not say, what do you do? Like, what really do you do? Because it's a role that nobody would really understand. Now the things have changed. I know that I work as a career counselor with Monash University, but it's easy to understand. But sometimes when I work in different contexts, it's not easy for them, nobody to understand that what the hell, do people pay for that kind of things? Like, what exactly do you do, right? So yeah, it was challenging initially. Obviously, that happens to everybody, not necessarily me. I find real enjoyment in doing the work that I do.
And it reminds me of when I first met you. I knew of you. I knew of the things that you do, and we missed out on working together. And I met you when you were launching your book, and we can maybe divert into a little bit of that. When I think about 15 years in career development, the birth of this book and the creation of this, would you like to share a little bit about the book that you've created? Because I just absolutely love the concept, and I'd love you to unpack it and tell us a little bit about how it came about.
Sure. Thank you, Angela. I think, most of us are visual learners. A lot of us are visual learners. I'm not an exception into that. I did not understand that, where can I learn things, even in engineering too. I struggled with a lot of principles because back in India at that time, we didn't have computers. So we didn't learn a lot of things. We still learn by reading the books and mathematics and a lot of other things, which I did not see the visuals of it. Like I still say that I've never seen 2-stroke and 4-stroke engine. I'm a mechanical engineer. I don't even know that. But then I think around COVID times, where it was obviously a disastrous time for many, many hundreds and millions of people across the world. At that time, I kind of reignited or kind of reinvigorated my love for visuals. And I then started to experiment and draw things, other people's work, just out of curiosity, not necessarily anything else. And then I did a couple of courses on doodling. Doodling is not particularly new concept, but doodling is a way for communication, using that as more of a communication tool. And then I started to draw things randomly. When I look at something, I would draw. There are books that I've got. So I pick up the book and draw things. It's just to kind of practicing. But then eventually what happened was that the more I started to get involved into it, the more I found that I can use day-to-day metaphors or day-to-day things. And I start to say, what, when I see, I don't know, a phone stand, for example, and I'll think about that the way you would put your phone to rest on the phone stand, considering where do you find your phone stand at the end of the day? Like a self-care, right? So I would start to think those kind of connecting those things that in front of me, but I'm starting to seeing that differently. And I started to draw. Draw is particularly, Angela, is not a difficult task, drawing itself. Because I can see clip arts and I can draw. But I enjoyed making connections of that and making things a little more easier and simpler for people to understand. And I believe that if you understand those things simply, you're able to act on them. For example, the draw, one of the picture was around the digging something that you like, and what stops you is people's expectations. So first of all, you're digging people's expectations out, and then you kind of figure out. And I use the construction equipment but when I show people that, it takes 10 seconds for people to, oh God, I know what you mean. But I can give half an hour session on how people's expectations really kind of, has an influence on their career choices. People still go home and say, you know what, yeah, that was a good session, but I don't know. I don't see that. It's not appealing to me. So that's what I really enjoyed, that process of making it easier and simpler and more enjoyable for people. And then I, obviously, as I started to share with a lot of people on LinkedIn, and then eventually one of the career practitioners said that I should turn that into a resource. So then I turned, how do I turn that into a resource? I reached out to career practitioners and coaches across the world. And then I wrote that book. They wrote the book. I just provided them drawings and they wrote their reflections on each of those drawings. And that's how we created the book. So it's actually it's not just my book. It's a creative collaboration with many, many people who generously gave their time and contributed and wrote something. Some of those stories are very personal stories as well, which I just asked them, I'm not going to change or edit anything. I want you to do what you think is right. And they were very generous and very gracious in sharing those stories with the world. So that's how it kind of came about, the whole book.
Yes, and I've got it sitting with me. It's called The Big Book of Career Doodles, and there was 87 visual ideas to inspire a great career. And you are right. When I look at that, I'm a very visual person. It's pretty instant. You said about 10 seconds. I reckon instantly we get it. If there's a bit more detail, if I know that you've got like a snakes and ladders one, and sometimes we need to unpack it a little bit more, yet there can be that instant connection that resonates, which it's good to then have that conversation with someone. What resonates for you compared to someone else?
Yeah.
There's so many in here. I know that there's 87. How many career doodles do you think you've done altogether? Are there ones that have never gone on to LinkedIn? Are there ones that that you screwed up and threw into the bin? How many doodles do you think you've done?
I think I've got another. So overall, I think I would have done original ideas around 200. So I've published around 87. There are around, since then, I've been drawing and showcasing on LinkedIn. So I think I'll have probably around 80, 90 more. But some of them are not particularly great ideas. I've just drew them, but I've just kept it hidden because I'm not still confident about those things. So it would be around similar one, around 80 to 90 similar ones that are shared, but I've not kind of collated that in one place.
And I like how you put on LinkedIn, sometimes you leave it open for interpretation as well. What would you add to this? I can remember there was a car dashboard and there's a steering wheel and indicators and there was that whole concept of your career, and it was great to input going, this is what resonates for me, or this is what I would love to add to this picture. You make it really interactive and people like to comment. And I noticed that you hit 20,000 followers recently. Congratulations on LinkedIn. Do you find that you're getting people interacting in a different way with these visuals and leaving it open to interpretation? I
think so. And I think that was something that I wasn't like... I did not start with that, but I think that people see differently from their own perspective. As we know, we see life, it's the same thing, but we see from a different one just because our lived experience is different. And I did an experiment, can't say experiment, but I did, in our team meeting at Monash University, I created some blank doodles without any text onto that. And I asked people to play with it or to draw or to write those stuff onto that. But individually, they approached it very differently. And I felt that was very, very poignant for me. And that's what I think the real value is. Is that if you make that meaningful for you and you take home, and every time you look at that, and if that's going to leave a positive impact on you, or you might see things differently, I think that those sketches have done their job. Because I always am limited in my understanding of careers or different concepts. People have got many enriched experience, and they might see it from that perspective, add value for them and for others by sharing that with the community. But either or, I'm very happy the way people are engaging with those visuals.
Yes, and to know that you've got that book and that people are reading it and using it in different ways, and we might bring this great conversation full circle. If you were to give career advice to your younger self, if you were looking back at that person in year 10 or studying university and you were the career practitioner sitting in front of yourself, what career advice would you give to you?
I think I would have asked myself to take arts or humanities. That's what I would say. I was very fortunate that one of my language teacher, put a very seed in and especially for me. I still remember vividly how he was standing when he was talking about it. Back in India, very small town, the way he was talking about choosing career, and that I didn't even know what career really means. But he said that you can make a difference in various ways. You just don't need to be engineers or doctors. There are many things that you can make a difference. And that stayed with me, that whatever that I do doesn't matter, but if it's got the element of making a difference or leaving a positive impact, I'm all for it. So I'm kind of fixated, I'm fueled by that. Then the job kind of appears and said, okay, does it align with that, or does it allow me to make a difference? So answering your question, I would have chosen arts or humanities or social science. That's what I would have said to myself then, back in 1990.
And so making a difference, would you say that's the thread that has gone through all that decision making unconsciously, consciously, that may have been steering you all this way to the big book of Career Doodles, making a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, engineering would have provided me more money, no doubt about it. If I stuck to it, I would probably be living somewhere in Turak with 4-5 bedroom house. I'm not saying it's wrong at all, I think, but I don't regret at all that I did engineering, and now I don't regret, because it still provided me lots of things. The next iteration of the work that I see, engineering plays a very important role for me, because I can visualize things and I can think about how can I make things. If I did not do engineering, I would not have seen that application, of that as well.
Yeah, so everything has accumulated and you're pulling all the skills and experience that you've acquired along the way.
Absolutely.
And is there anything that you'd like to leave the listeners with, if there was a parting comment or a thought, or even unpacking a career doodle? What would you like to leave us with?
I think I always have a belief that we will all have great careers. I think we will do extraordinary things in our life. That's what I believe. Those people who listen to this, I can tell you that we will all have extraordinary careers. You just have to back yourself up. Sometimes you end up making absolutely wrong decision about your career, but who has got that crystal ball? Who has got that? No one. So I think you've got to give yourself the chance to take that leap of faith, and go with it. That's what I would say.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you again for joining us and sharing your story of the career advice that you didn't have and what you do now. And I'll put links to you and your book in the show notes. And thank you for joining us.
Absolute pleasure, Angela. Thank you for the opportunity. I loved reflecting back and seeing my journey in last half an hour. So thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Naish's story reminds me how we always end up where we are meant to be, even if we take the long, windy way to get there, and just how much we learn about ourselves from each experience. After listening to today's episode, what is that one thing that you'll take away? You'll find Naish's details in the show notes below, and make sure you check out his Career Doodles on LinkedIn. In future episodes, we'll be exploring planned happenstance, and I'll also provide my first meditation. Remember, your career journey is as unique as you are. Embrace your journey with an open mind and heart. There are many people who haven't had the career advice they have needed along their journey, and I'm here to provide that. Thank you again for listening and for sharing this with someone who is looking for career inspiration. And together, we'll navigate this journey as you find your way, rediscover yourself, and focus on taking the next meaningful step in your career.